Hi there, welcome to the channel. I hope everything is fine wherever you are watching from. As promised, in this video, I'm going to share the steps I use and give tips on what worked for me when painting water. But before we start, let me first clarify that there are three states of flow of water. There's laminar, which you can observe mostly in lakes, where you can clearly see what's beneath the water near you. There's transitional flow, which this video is about, and then there's turbulent, which is white water wherein you have no clue on what's underneath the water. And this video focuses on painting water in transitional flow. Before we start, here's what's on my palette for this painting. If you're interested in all the materials I am using here, I'll include their links in the description below. Now, let's start. When I paint moving water or water in transitional flow, I follow one simple rule, which is to paint from bottom to top. This doesn't mean that I start from the bottom of my canvas to the top of my canvas. No, this means that I paint what's underneath the water first. Then paint the reflections on the water surface over the first layer of paint. Then last will be the highlights on the surface of the water. I find that this allows me to focus on the general shapes and colors in each layer, instead of getting confused on my mixes from jumping back and forth on colors underneath the surface and the reflections on the water surface. Not to mention the highlights, which will add to the confusion when you paint them all at once. Now, again starting with the first layer. Here, I'm putting the colors that I see are what's underneath the water. In this case, these are most likely rocks which look green due to the green tint of the water. I'm also keeping this layer thin, since we still need to follow the thick over thin rule. Notice also that at the mid-ground portion, I went straight to painting the sky reflection. This is because in my reference, I no longer see any colors of what's underneath. After the first layer has dried or at least is already tacky, I now paint the reflections on the surface. At this point, you have the freedom to choose whether you will use glazing technique, paint thick or thin, or dry brushing depending on the transparency you want and also on how you think the image needs to be painted. This layer is mostly mixes of blues and grays with lots of white due to the reflection of the sky. Personally, I use ultramarine, burnt umber, and titanium white with a touch of cerulean blue. I found that using cerulean blue in my mixes enhanced the realism in my paintings as compared to before, when I only have ultramarine as my blue. You just have to be careful because it has such a strong chroma and will overpower other colors. Also, another important thing to note in this layer is that reflections of the sky on the water surface tend to gradually disappear as you go nearer to the foreground. The final layer will be the highlights. This includes the small patches of white water on the crests of the ripples and the glistening reflections of sunlight. One thing I do to give the glistening highlights more glow is a dry brush a mix of almost pure white on the parts where I will put the highlights on. Here, I'm using a palette knife to put the highlights on because this, to me, gives more character to my painting, and it's faster. Now, having said all that, I'm not saying you can't paint it all at once and paint exactly as you see in your reference. I just think that painting it in 3 layers allows you to paint loosely, which will give more character and interest on your painting. If you enjoyed this video and you learned something from it, please give it a thumbs up. And if you like to see more painting tips, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.